Federal government wants big companies to get on board when it comes to new accounting rules that are all designed to help curb the impact of climate change. Now, its emissions trading scheme still being debated in Parliament. Companies, though, already have to meet certain requirements. The National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Laws are what's guiding them, and to discuss the obligations that they're facing and impact of the government's reforms for business, I checked in earlier with Environment and Sustainability Manager at NCS International, Nav Bra. Started by asking him what deadlines firms are facing.
Yes, it's a looming deadline tomorrow, Carsten, for about 700 odd Australian companies that exceed certain emissions thresholds. According to the government's National Greenhouse Gas and Energy Reporting Act, these companies are required to report their energy footprint. And the reporting deadline is tomorrow, so they've got to report their energy data as well as their greenhouse gas emissions footprint.
How do you measure an energy footprint practically? It seems very nebulous.
Look, it is. It's quite a complex exercise. There's actually an international standard, ISO 14064, which basically provides companies with guidance and a specification on how they should identify their greenhouse gas emissions boundary, the methodologies they should employ in calculating and measuring their emissions and quantifying their emissions, and indeed a process for independently verifying and assuring their emissions.
Now, you're telling me, correct me if I'm wrong, that only one company so far has actually complied with all of this, or is that being a little bit disingenuous?
That's probably being a little bit disingenuous.
Okay.
Look, I think a lot of the large Australian emitters who have a whole plethora of compliance requirements are well underway towards fulfilling their reporting obligations.
So just before we go any further, largest emitters complying with reporting obligations, that is not synonymous, though, with bringing about tangible reductions in those emissions, is it?
No, look, this is what this is doing is it's developing a baseline from which we can understand as Australia what is our global carbon footprint. This reporting requirement that the government has for the largest companies, which cover a wide range of industry sectors. You know, so we're talking about mining, utilities, resources companies, transport companies, data centres, heavy industrial manufacturing companies, food manufacturing companies, even the large retailers are required to report their carbon footprint. And once the government has all this data, and it's very important to make sure that the data is accurate, robust, and independently verified and assured.
Who's getting out there to independently verify it? What's the personnel like behind all of this?
Well, look, there's with ISO 14064, which is the international standard, it provides the most robust platform and specification for verifying greenhouse gas emissions and assurance standards.
How?
Well, basically, practically, to verify a company's greenhouse gas footprint, the company has to engage independent auditors. Independent auditors go into that company. The audit team has to have a range of competencies, and understanding of management systems, engineering technical requirements, process and understanding of an industry's specific processes. So, you know, it's a multidisciplinary approach. You have to understand what a company's organisational boundaries are, what their organisational and corporate structure is. Have they got joint ventures? Have they got contractors? Because
how long does a process like that take?
Look, the process can take anything up to 3 months. That's not an unreasonable time frame to audit companies, and it happens in stages. You know, you might visit a company, undertake a risk assessment, get an understanding of their boundaries, what their emissions profile is, and then subsequently the company prepares its report, and then you perform a risk assessment on a company, sort of say what sort of systems have they got in place, how robust is their reporting organisation, what's the quality of their data. Do they have good internal controls?
And what sort of costs are we talking to actually undertake this audit?
Look, the cost ranges. It's horses for courses, as you'd appreciate, for large companies such as Eraring Energy, who recently achieved certification to the international standard. Eraring Energy has quite a large, as a power station, has quite a large carbon footprint. So for a power station, you know, you could be talking of costs up to about $50,000. For smaller industries, it could be $10,000. So it's not a huge investment to get the assurance you require, to make sure that whatever you're reporting is accurate.
It's got to be said, if you don't sign up to this, you are in line for a fine of as much as $220,000. Is that really enough of a disincentive to not comply? For some of those big emitters, that's just loose change.
Rest assured, for some of those big emitters, because this can be a liability for company directors. So $220,000 and plus the loss of reputation and credibility in the marketplace and loss of investor confidence is a very big stick. And it's very important for companies, therefore, to make sure that their reports are independently verified and assured.
And just to wrap this one up, the government's going to get this data, and go to Copenhagen with it in its proverbial file on the side. What will then we be using it to do? Just say, look, we are keeping things under control, or what?
Yes. Well, look, this reporting requirement will underpin our future ETS, our emissions trading scheme. So it's the baseline data that we need to establish a cap for Australian emissions.
Haven't we already said what that cap's going to be?
Well, look, currently, as nationally, Australia's global footprint is around about 600,000 million tonnes, thereabouts.
So we know that it already, not irrespective of getting all this data.
But not in that data has never been collected in as robust a process as is required by the ENGA legislation.
Arguably it could be less, arguably it could be more than that.
Arguably it could be less, arguably it could be more. But what's important for companies, Carson, and this is important to state, a recent survey as recently as 3 months ago, the top 150 corporations basically found that only 25% of those companies were prepared for the CPRS, and only 15% of those companies even had any sort of understanding whether they had, didn't know whether they needed to report under NGAs. Now that's a big concern.
We'll take a break. Stick with us. When we come back, we'll take you to Simon Mariner at St George with his eye on what's going to move us today.